and welcome to Tech Latest from Nikkei Asia, where we bring you fresh updates from the Asian tech sector. I'm your host, Shotaro Tani, and in this week's episode, we dive into how Chinese car makers are rapidly making inroads into the Australian auto market. With me to discuss the topic is Shaun Turton, our Sydney correspondent. Shaun, welcome to the show.
Good to be here again. Thanks for having me.
So, before we dive into the topic, set the scene for us, Shaun. What's the Australian auto market like in terms of size, market share, and why is it considered a tough market to crack?
Well, it's a bit of a battle royale, really. It's about 1.2 million car sales a year, and that level stayed pretty constant for quite some time. But you've got more than sort of 70 plus brands competing in that market. So if you compare it to somewhere like the US, they sell 17 million new cars a year, but there's 40 or so brands. So there's a lot of makers competing for quite a limited pool of new sales. So just the sheer competition I think is quite unique. And China's made some pretty substantial inroads.
Who's got the biggest market share right now? Is it the Japanese car makers, is it the US car makers, or the European car makers? Or?
The big dog at the moment the big dog for a long time has been Toyota. Toyota is by far the market leader. After them sort of come Mazda and Ford as the sort of top three. But within the top 10, the sort of Chinese brands have sort of emerged pretty quickly. If you're sort of looking at this year's sales figures, you've got MG at number 10, BYD's number 8, and GWN number 7. So seeing as they've only sort of been in the market for, in some cases only a few years, it's a pretty rapid ascent.
So why are the Chinese manufacturers coming to Australia? What in particular about the Australian market that appeals to them?
Well, the Australian market has been described as a pretty ideal test market. You've got sort of high-paying customers, almost zero trade barriers. Australia sort of gave up its car industry or lost its car industry a number of years ago, so there's no real local sector to protect. So, it's sort of free game for importers to come in here and try to get sales.
And what in particular, do these Chinese cars offer to the Australian people that, incumbents like the Japanese and the US manufacturers don't?
At one level, price is hard to go past. They're sort of able to offer, models or similar models to their rivals, but at price points that are, sort of thousands of dollars cheaper. So, that sort of particularly became important sort of post-COVID, like a lot of other places in the world. We had inflation and, there was a real run on cars during COVID as well. And, out of that, the Chinese makers were able to sort of offer a price point that just some of their legacy rivals from Japan, South Korea and Europe and America sort of aren't able to really match. So that's, I guess an advantage. And, they're sort of trying to, I guess, appeal more to the Australian markets. They've entered pretty deliberately the ute market, which
explain what the ute market is.
Utes. If you saw one, you'd probably think it's just an Australian word for pickup truck, which more or less now it is, but. Utes sort of have a pretty sort of unique heritage in Australia. The term ute or coupe utility actually referred to sort of a specific type of vehicle that was sort of pioneered into Australia. The cargo bed was sort of integrated into the chassis, and that was a model that was pioneered in Australia, and the term sort of caught on. But now it's just sort of used more broadly for sort of pickup truck type models, and they've got a lot of sort of cultural, weight in Australia. Most workmen in Australia, sort of known as tradies, will have their utes, and they've got sort of off-road heritage as well. So it's a model of car that certainly resonates in Australia.
Is that why the Chinese manufacturers are targeting that segment?
I think that's part of it, and also, given the sort of focus on it in Australia. It's a great test bed to figure out, how to tune these models, particularly for right-hand drive markets. Some of the brands have said that that's a real focus for them, getting their models right in Australia so they can sort of take them global, which is sort of a broader theme through the story I recently wrote. That Australia is sort of seen as a real test market to succeed, and if you sort of succeed in Australia, you can sort of take those lessons and apply them to sort of further expansion.
Yeah. Is there any technical advantage, since this is a tech podcast? Is there any technical advantage that the Chinese cars have over the Japanese equivalent or the US equivalent?
Well, I suppose when we talk about technical advantage, another aspect that's probably going to help Chinese makers sort of succeed in Australia is their strength in EVs and increasingly hybrids. Australia has recently brought in sort of fuel efficiency standards, which are going to sort of push makers to reduce the overall sort of carbon output of their fleets. So, makers like BYD that are, some of the biggest EV makers in the world, they're going to have sort of an advantage when it comes to that tech in Australia, and being able to do it sort of at a speed and scale that maybe some of the rivals might struggle with. And in the on the off-road segment more broadly, I mean, part of the story that I did recently sort of looked at GWM pitting its Ute model, the Cannon, against a pretty treacherous hill at a four-wheel drive park in Queensland. And sort of what they wanted to do was prove that their four-wheel drive wasn't just marketing itself as capable of doing these things, that the technology in the car could actually accomplish it. So that sort of space, I think, is going to be a bit of a battleground. After GWM went ahead and did that test, Kia, the South Korean automaker, followed up and got their Ute up. So it's become a bit of a battle to prove the mettle of these, the sort of tech in these cars, that they can sort of do what they say on the label.
And I guess, I mean, the youth population in particular, they don't really have an affinity towards certain brands, right? So if the cost is cheap and if it performs well on the road or on off road as well, then they're more inclined to go for the Chinese vehicles.
Yeah, it's something that's, I mean, Australia, when it had its own car industry, there was sort of a real sort of allegiance to either Ford or Holden, which was the Australian sort of owned GWM manufacturer. And so for years, Ford and Holden were the sort of cornerstones of the Australian auto industry and the Australian auto sports. After that, Japanese sort of cars came in a wave and really eked out a niche and became dominant. And I mean, they sort of focused more on broader appeal. There was sort of a moment when they started to essentially sponsor every sporting competition in Australia, which sort of helps get their brands into the hearts and minds of sport-loving Australians. And sort of South Koreans automakers have done that as well, and now Chinese automakers are going in that route. They've sort of picked up more sports sponsorships and are sort of trying to get themselves, in front of the eyeballs of Australians. So there's that push, and it's definitely combined with maybe less loyalty among younger customers.
What kind of sports are they getting into? I mean, obviously, when you think of motorsports, Red Bull, they're not an automaker, but Red Bull comes to mind, the extreme sports and whatnot, and that's kind of led to, the young generation taking to the particular drink. But what sports are the Chinese getting into?
Well, it's funny you say, the motorsports, because so one of the guys I was speaking to who sort of spent his early career at Holden, which sort of doesn't exist anymore, but was sort of the quintessential Australian car brand. He sort of said that Holden and Ford got caught napping because of their focus on autosports. So, they would compete every year at this very famous race in Australia called Bathurst. And so they sort of relied on that to sort of raise brand awareness and shift cars. And then sort of Toyota came in and sort of caught everyone napping, and sponsors the Australian football, the cricket, all these sort of mainstream sports that Australians love. So I think more recently BYD has come in with sponsored NRL sponsorships. Cherry, another one, is sponsoring an AFL team. And GWM sort of told me that they're preparing to announce a sort of tier one sports sponsorship in the near future. So yeah, that's the sort of cultural space I suppose they're trying to get into, this broader mass market in Australia.
Sorry, AFL is the Aussie Football League, is it?
Yeah, AFL is Australian football. I think objectively the best code of football that exists. I might be a bit biased. I'm from Victoria, where the game was born, but yeah, these are the types of areas these sort of brands are looking to get themselves in front of customers and just get their brands in sort of the minds of Australians that are going to buy new cars.
Interesting. But obviously, the incumbents aren't really, standing still and just, watching China, eat away at their market share, right? So, what are the incumbents, the Japanese, the US, the Europeans, doing to counter this trend?
I mean, they're doing their best in terms of, reaffirming ties with their dealers and. Sort of leaning a lot on their historic sort of legacy brands in Australia as well. I mean, in terms of price, as we've seen more broadly around the world, sometimes it just is difficult to have any direct response to that. But one of the other things that sort of come up in discussions about, where the market might be going in the future is whether or not sort of Chinese brands will be able to establish the post-sale networks they need. So these are things like, repair shops, servicing, all the stuff you sort of need after you drive a car off a lot. I mean, the Japanese brands, the legacy brands have spent a lot of time, training mechanics, building up these networks. And so there's sort of eyes on some of these Chinese brands, whether they're going to put enough effort into ensuring that they're able to meet customers' needs. Because if you get a car and it starts breaking down and it's hard to get it fixed, then maybe you won't be picking that model the next time around.
What are the challenges? You obviously mentioned a dealership, but what other challenges are there that the Chinese automakers face?
I mean, I guess it comes back down to competition, right? Like at the end of the day, if we sort of look over the last 12 months or sort of look in the future, there's been about sort of 10 brands or subsidiaries of brands that have come into the market. So, not everyone's going to be able to maybe get a foothold. It'll sort of come down into, whether, one or two will be able to establish a foothold, establish a network and really sort of set themselves up in Australia.
That's it for this week's episode. You can read more of Shaun's story as well as the latest Asian tech news on our website, asia.nikkei.com. You can also subscribe to our weekly Tech Asia newsletter, which will be delivered to your inbox every Thursday. Thank you for tuning in and see you in our next episode.